click record, and then we'll go.
Good. Well, welcome everybody.
Yes, Casper, it's all you.
Yes, so my name is Casper van Amelsvoort. I work at Rabobank, one of the largest food and agri banks globally. I work in the workplace services department as a product owner. I won't go into too much detail about what I do from day to day, but in our P group meeting 2 weeks ago, was it? I happened to mention that I was working with experience level agreements, and Janus asked me, so could you share a bit? Some of the slides I shared then are in this presentation. If you have any questions, just holler. What is user experience actually, and why do we think it's important, and how can you measure it? That's basically the tenet of this talk. And to start, I always use this quote by Maya Angelou, one of the famous American poets, that people will forget what you said, and they also will forget what you did, but they not forget how you made them feel. And if you look at your own life, I think you probably also remember situations or people because of what you felt at the time, what exactly was said. That goes for life, but it also goes for services, and also in this case for IT services. So the challenge for IT is, and I've discussed this internally as well, that you have to focus on meaningful experiences. So moving away from just having services or talking about SLAs, I'll talk a bit more about SLAs later on, and focus more on what actually the user or your customer or your employee is experiencing, which is a difficult conversation for most IT people because they're used to thinking in a binary way, black or white, and experience is never binary. It's always a shade of gray, and it's about how somebody feels. It's subjective. And especially if you're talking about outsourcing contracts, that's well, a challenge, I would say. It's not impossible to put that into contracts. But well, let's discuss this a bit more, because the question then becomes, if an experience is very important, how do you measure that? And the key to measuring it is coming at it from a customer perspective. Depends on the perspective, you have different metrics, different ways to measure as well. And I found this nice cartoon where depending on which department you're in, you have a completely different view of the product or service the company is supplying, where the consumer in the end really doesn't care. They're just hungry and hope that there's something in the fridge. So how does that work? Experience with a product or a service does influence people, influence their opinions, influence their behavior, and in that sense, perception is reality. Again, a concept that's sometimes quite alien to a lot of more technical-driven specialists, where they say it's there or it isn't there. Well, with experience, it's something that's actually created, an experience is created within the perception of an individual. And therefore you can have many experiences. There's not one experience with a given service or a product. But it does influence people's behavior. They can walk away, they can choose other solutions. In our case, they can choose to use shadow IT, which we don't want. But an important part of experience is that it's not just one interaction, it's a series of interactions that shape experience. So this example on the slide illustrates this. So if you're an employee with a broken laptop, you call the service desk mostly to get it fixed. Then a lot of other processes happen, other transactions happen, which are invisible to you. And in the end, hopefully you're supplied with a replacement. That total process, the whole time, is encapsulated in one experience, where a lot of the times we currently measure, for instance, first call resolution in the service desk. That's just a part of the whole experience process for the employee. And like I said at the start, experience is something that stays with the employee. So if you ask an employee later on, what do you think of the service desk? It depends when you ask it, but also how you ask it, what answer you give. He gives, or she gives, and that's actually because there's a big difference between outputs and outcomes. So the output of the example I just gave was a new laptop, and very often that's measured through a customer satisfaction survey immediately after. And obviously customer is satisfied because their problem is resolved or not. But it's just part of what shapes the experience of the customer. So measuring those KPIs, so customer satisfaction or first call resolution or availability, uptime, costs or scope, or just all these very hard quantitative measures have very little bearing on predictability of the future, because it's just one aspect you're measuring one moment in time and not something that may evolve over time, because people's opinions and therefore behavior changes over time. So you should focus on measuring outcomes, not outputs. And outcomes can be defined as how happy is a customer with, in total, with your service or your product. Are they able to do their job? What's the time to market? So it's much more holistic. And that means that currently there often is a gap between IT and business. And that's where experience level agreements come in. So as I alluded to earlier, the problems with measuring current measurements and having those applied to measuring experience is that you're not measuring experience. You're measuring KPIs, uptime, stuff like that, first call resolution. And you're measuring satisfaction instead of experience. Satisfaction being satisfaction with the transaction that just happened, not with the overall impression somebody has over time, over multiple interactions they've had. Yeah, one of the things that's often used is Net Promoter Score. Now, I don't know how many of you have actually read the book by Frederick Reichheld, but Net Promoter Score is quite often abused. And even the guy that actually invented Net Promoter Score actively discourages it to use it as an indicator of future behavior. A lot of research has shown that there is no link between measuring a Net Promoter Score and predictability of the behavior of the user. So that's actually something that, well, makes you feel happy about your services, but has no bearing on actually what will happen in the future. So you need to track experience over a longer period of time to actually notice any changes, and also to be able to predict the future, and also actually to have a valuable measurement of experience and therefore of satisfaction with your customers. So what are the main differences? And I'm trying to close this talk in a few moments so we have time for questions. The big difference between a service level agreement and experience level agreement is that the service level agreement is a contract. You deliver X performance in Y time, whereas an SLA is more of a commitment. You promise to deliver something for a future state, which can be measured with experience indicators, which is different than KPIs. You still need to keep it KPIs. I'll come to that later. But experience indicators are much more geared toward what's that experience and how do you measure that, and measure that continuously. Not measure the individual transaction, but measure the state and how it evolves over time. So SLAs are geared towards a commitment for experience and creating sentiment around a product or service, and therefore much more deep-rooted to align to the company goals, not looking at the individual transactions, but looking at the bigger picture. And that's where the watermelon analogy comes in. I don't know if any of you ever heard of this analogy, but the watermelon analogy works thusly. This is why you need to strive for kiwis and not for watermelons, kiwi fruit, is that very often, and I don't know if you had this experience, you measure your KPIs according to your SLAs, and everything seems fine. For instance, the first call resolution of the service desk is well within parameters. They deserve a pat on the back, and still users are vehemently unsatisfied. And that's because your SLA and KPIs aren't aligned to actually what the user actually is expecting as an experience. So that's a watermelon situation where the outside looks green, but the inside is blood red. And you want to have a situation where the outside and the inside are both green. So, and this is how SLAs and XLAs tie together. You still need XLAs about uptime and first call resolution, stuff like that. But overarching, you need XLAs. So agreements geared towards customer happiness and user experience and measured up through experience indicators. So we don't have to do away with SLAs. We have to craft something on top of that. And then it's almost my last slide. I see here are some definitions. I won't run through all these definitions, but be aware that there are definitions. You'll get the slides later. XLAs, at least in the Netherlands, are also ingrained in official definitions already, the NEN definitions. So it's becoming more and more a recognized way of doing business, or a recognized way of defining your business and your services. I talked about XIs already, and you can also translate all those experience indicators into one employee experience score, or sometimes called digital experience score, DEX, and have that as a measurement. So to wrap up, I feel like I've been talking very fast, so I can imagine that you won't have had a chance to actually process everything, but I'm open to questions also afterwards. So imagine how you want to make your users feel about, in this case, workplace services. That's the department I work for, but you can fill in your own department here, about the services, how the processes, or even you as a department, as a person responsible for these processes and services, right? So sometimes it's people equate your services with you as a person. How do you want people to think about you? Transform yourself from delivering services to delivering experiences. I won't go so far as to say deliver happiness, because that's sometimes not the business we're in, but it's more about the total package. And move away from managing just incidents and manage the conversation. What do you need as a user? What can we do for you? That's a much more valid and valuable conversation than just having an incident queue which you run down every day. I haven't talked about governance, but obviously around this whole topic, there's the whole governance discussion. How do you manage this? And in the end, I think experience actually will guide your career as a holistic phrase here, because that's where we're heading. So my question to you is, how was your experience with this talk?
Thank you very much, Casper. I had a good experience, and looking at the chat, it seems like at least one agrees that this is the right approach. Without revealing too much, Casper, I think this is something, if you could just zoom back, not necessarily in the slides, but I think you told me that you were introduced first to this topic about a year ago.
Yes, almost a year and a half, even. Yeah.
And how far down the road are you now in terms of implementing this?
Well, that's a good question. My squad actually is now measuring digital experience score, and that's made up of user questions and also hardware measurements, and then combined to Form 1 score, which measures our services. So we're starting to use this, but I've noticed, like I said before, that having that conversation with other managers and other teams made of IT guys is, like I said, it's a grayish area. It's not black and white. It's not binary, and they've got difficulties to grasp the concept that actually you need to talk to humans and not to machines. And that's not what they're hired for. They're hired to talk to machines and not to humans. So that's a big gap. And also I was talking about governance. To get this off the ground, obviously you want to have this as part of your performance management system. So managers should, to make this a success, they should make this also part of their own performance criteria and the performance management criteria for their teams.
So basically, you're saying it's not just something you do.
No, it's a system change almost.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Very interesting. Any other questions, comments, reflections? Gerard, do you want to just briefly introduce yourself, Gerard, and then take the question?
Sure. Gerard Perrot from the Corteva company in the agriculture business. I'm a global leader for marketing, automation, and CRM in the company located in Switzerland. Mm-hmm. My question is, I've seen ups and downs in the various companies I work with on this measurement part, right, that you so successfully described. And the challenge I've seen is that the leaders sometimes don't want to spend the amount of resources needed to get to these processes where we truly measure those experiences, satisfaction, and then we do something with that information, right? And mm-hmm. And of course, if the data is there, it's hard for a leader to dispute it. But very often, it takes money and resources and even systems to do these measurements correctly. So how do you convince a leader who, a customer leader, a commercial leader, a marketing leader, a VP level, and they have to release funding for this to happen. So what's your sales pitch on convincing them that they should measure more?
Well, I think it starts with what are their pain points? Where do they hurt? And if they're outgoing and talk to their external customers or employees, they really listen. That's sometimes a problem. They probably hear a bigger story than nobody ever complains about your uptime, at least not customers. They complain about not being treated fairly, or that your service is crap, or it's usually the feedback also they get at their level is phrased in terms of an experience, a crappy experience or a good experience. So that's where I would say is your opportunity to highlight that and say, so if you get feedback about experiences and we don't measure experiences internally, how do you expect to improve? Because you want to do a plan, do, check, act cycle, right? So and if people keep talking to you, the manager, about experiences, and we keep measuring just SLAs and KPIs, that doesn't match, and that's a type of clarity. I mean, this is a very short presentation, but this is an insight you could bring to them, saying, so not talk about money and not talk about tools initially, but talk about their problems and talk about their needs in being able to steer the company in the right direction, so as to better meet the needs of the market.
Can I name one example of what I think is an XLA?
Yeah.
I'm not sure, but I work in digital workplace team in an enterprise, And we measure since a couple of months the productivity scorecard, which is a default range of numbers in percentage. On, for instance, how effective are your meetings? How effective is your teamwork? How effective is your communication? It's measured by Microsoft. We don't need to create those dashboards. Would you think this is an XLA example?
Well, these are XIs, so it's experience indicators. So asking people about their experience. So did you have a productive meeting? That's you're asking about their experience with having meetings. An XLA is a more broadly phrased contract where this could be one of the measurements as part of having a great place to work, for instance. That would be an SLA target, an XLA target, I should say. And then one of the measurement criteria in there could be how well are the meetings supported, or your experiences with meetings. So I think it's a good example, and it's part of a bigger story there.
So in terms of trying to moderate, let's move to Gurdeep, and then there was a question in the chat afterwards, but moving to Copenhagen, Gurdeep.
Yeah, I'm part of Trick4Sick Ring in the IT department. So I think XLAs plays a very important role in understanding and bringing us closer to the customer. But it's also a paradigm shift where we are looking towards, the inside-out approach versus outside-in approach, where we're looking from the customer's perspective. One of the things is to also understand, because that's what we know, but it's when you try and transfer it more into the practical world, as it was said that we have challenges with respect to money and investments and all that stuff. How do we actually go back from, do you think it's more important to shift the paradigm first before bringing the XLAs in picture, or we should bring in the XLAs first and then bring in the tools to shift the paradigm over the period of time with data?
Well, in my experience, I did this talk a year ago for a lot of our managers, and it went over their heads completely.
Yeah.
So I would say first work on understanding of, as you say quite rightly, it's moving towards from inside out to outside in, from technology driven to user requested, and have that consensus first. So it's a very basic level of, do we all understand that the world is shifting, that the world around us is changing, and that the requirements and the requests we get is also changing, or we're missing the boat, right? So if we keep just pushing technology, people will walk away if that doesn't fit their needs. And there are much more opportunities currently to walk away and use shadow IT, for instance, in workplace services, as long as that's not blocked by your firewall. And then you're just basically becoming obsolete. So first have that understanding, common understanding within your management team, that actually the world is changing, the needs of the company, the needs of the employees are changing. And by the way, the opportunities are changing too, so move with the times. And then later on, you can start formalizing stuff in XLAs, and buying tools and buying systems and organizing yourselves and having specific teams looking at this. But it starts with getting some foundation on what's happening.
Sure.
And then we have a question in the chat from Alex. I don't know if you can see it, Casper.
Yeah,
or Alex, all right, you got it, Casper?
Yeah. The question is, would you agree product designers, not necessarily PMs or POs, are a natural partner for pushing the topic? So if you mean product designers as in people with more user experience design capabilities and versed in holding surveys or communication or interactions with the end user, then sure. Sometimes I've seen product designers which are more like solution engineers and just look at the technical architecture. So and they never talk to any users. So it depends how they actually do their jobs. But so potentially, yes.
Okay, thanks for this. No, that's exactly the point that I wanted to understand better. But Dave, the point was that basically they're somebody who has been fighting a bit to raise their voice. Hey, design is essential to a modern product, no matter if it's a consumer grade product or a business to business grade product. So that's okay. Thank you.
Just organizing a meeting where real customers talk to your developers, that sometimes is really eye-opening to them. Just not looking at the computer screen, but having to face another person, another human that actually says, you have this service for me or this product, and I can't do what I need to do my job, and it's crappy. That hits home much harder than having an email or some kind of survey. So sometimes if you can organize those meetups, that really triggers stuff and actually sometimes moves the bar a lot.
What can be very useful as well is to have a developer attending training sessions with customers. And then they realize that the application is maybe not used as expected.
Thank you, Sam. Good to hear your voice.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's a very valid suggestion, yes.
All right, we're coming up at the end. I think we have time for another yes or no question, but not much more than that. Thank you very much, Casper. Thank you for sharing openly, giving us a peek behind the scenes. Any closing questions here at the end? If not, I'll just say thank you very much, Casper. Thank you for sharing. Really appreciate it. Good luck, all of you, implementing the big paradigm shift from SLAs to XLAs. It sounds to Casper like you'll need it.
Oh, we're not done either, right? So it's a way to go.